$75,000. Just let that number sit with you for a second. According to transnational crime reports, that is the estimated black market price for a full set of human organs belonging to a person with albinism in Tanzania. We aren't talking about stolen goods or contraband here. We are literally talking about human life, dissected and priced out for pure profit. So let's get right into this explainer, because that single, staggering number sits at the center of one of the most horrifying and lucrative trafficking crimes on the planet.
The profitable superstition, Tanzania's black market for human life. How exactly does a fringe superstition mutate into a highly organized, deadly, and multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise? Well, today we're launching a full investigation into Tanzania's black market. We're going to trace that dangerous intersection of belief and money, examine the real documented cases, and expose the networks running the whole shebang. And we'll ask the hardest questions. Why did this go on for so long? And what happens to the communities caught right in the crossfire?
Part 1. The belief that started it. You know, the very first psychological step in this whole crisis, it's the weaponization of language. In Tanzania, which actually has a remarkably high population of persons with albinism, roughly 1 in 1,400 people, individuals are often slapped with horrific derogatory terms like ghosts or white goats. In a lot of rural communities, they're viewed as otherworldly, cursed, or even, wildly enough, blamed for natural disasters like droughts. And history shows us, once a group is socially stigmatized and stripped of their humanity, they become incredibly vulnerable targets. So what actually are these beliefs? The violence is fueled by this completely baseless myth that albino body parts, bones, blood, skin, or organs hold magical properties. People genuinely believe potions made from these remains are going to bring them wealth, agricultural luck, or huge business success. Plus, there's this incredibly dangerous, entirely false idea that intercourse with a woman with albinism cures HIV/AIDS, which, as you can imagine, has led to some truly horrific assaults. And to top it off, witch doctors promise that these charms can basically guarantee election victories or secure massive government contracts.
Part 2. When belief became a business.
And here is where ancient cultural myth pivots hard into the brutal reality of modern criminal profiteering. $340,000. That's the estimated black market value of a live albino child. It's just sickening. These beliefs didn't surge in recent decades out of some deep-rooted tradition. They surged because of criminal opportunism. Traffickers saw the economic desperation and lack of law enforcement in rural areas, and they exploited it. They built these sprawling transnational routes, literally smuggling human parts from Tanzania out into Malawi, Burundi, Kenya, and beyond.
Part 3. The most disturbing cases. To really grasp this grim reality, we need to look at 3 deeply disturbing data points. First off, attacks surged massively between 2007 and 2009. In 2008, a 22-year-old woman named Zawadi Magindu was murdered in the Gator region, her limbs actually severed by attackers. Then, jumping ahead to 2014 and 2015, we saw a horrific new wave that focused heavily on child abductions in Mwanza and Gita, driven by this twisted idea that children's remains are somehow more potent. And finally, guys, this is an ongoing crisis. Graves are still being desecrated today, and right now there are at least 34 documented survivors living with amputations from machete-wielding attacks.
Part 4. Who was really behind it?
Okay, so who's actually running this operation? The sources break down a chilling 4-tier hierarchy of these transnational criminal networks. It's like peeling back the layers of a mafia syndicate. Step 1. Traditional healers or witch doctors act as the instigators. They recruit and even instruct armed gangs on exactly how to kill specific victims. Step 2. Criminal gangs, usually young guys motivated by quick cash, act as the hired killers, surrounding victims' homes in the dead of night. Step 3. Traders and middlemen smuggle and process the parts, moving them across international borders. And Step 4. Sitting right at the very top of the food chain, wealthy profiteers. These are unnamed politicians, businessmen, and community leaders who actually have the tens of thousands of dollars needed to drive this demand.
If you want proof of who those wealthy profiteers at the top really are, just look at the timing. Activists and officials have explicitly linked massive spikes in violence directly to election cycles. In 2010, 2015, and 2020, killings completely surged as political campaigns went looking for witchcraft luck to win their campaigns. Superstition literally funded the bloodshed. Part 5. Why was it so hard to stop?
The answer lies in a massive systemic failure of justice and a deep culture of impunity. NGOs report at least 79 confirmed killings by 2024, but contrast that with the fact that by 2015, there were only about 17 suspects convicted and placed on death row for these crimes. And honestly, Even those convictions are basically symbolic. See, Tanzania has had a de facto moratorium on executions since the late 90s, which means death sentences just turn into endless appeals or life behind bars. Fear keeps witnesses from testifying, bribery derails justice left and right, and in a lot of villages, cases are just written off as unsolved or the victims simply disappeared.
Compounding the whole problem is the legal framework itself. Tanzania has been relying on the 1928 Witchcraft Act. This is an insanely outdated colonial-era law that criminalizes sorcery but is dangerously vague on the maximum penalties for the actual violent crimes associated with it. There's literally no specific hate crime or aggravated offense law for targeting persons with albinism, so prosecutors just have to rely on standard murder statutes, which completely fails to address the highly organized transnational trafficking nature of what's really going on here.
Part 6. Tanzania fights back.
In March 2015, the government finally launched a massive nationwide police sweep, which resulted in the arrest of 225 unlicensed witch doctors. They utilized that old Witchcraft Act to ban these practitioners entirely, basically trying to cut the head off the snake. But it's worth noting, a lot of these arrests were just for practicing without a license or possessing occult items, rather than direct murder charges. Now, the most monumental shift in accountability happened very recently. In February 2025, following a massive case filed by legal advocates, the African Court on Human and People's Rights delivered a landmark judgment. They officially ruled that Tanzania is legally liable for failing to protect persons with albinism. This is a legally binding ruling ordering the government to amend the Witchcraft Act, create a national action plan, and most importantly, establish a compensation fund for the victims. It was an absolute game changer and a huge victory for NGOs like Under the Same Sun and the Tanzania Albino Society, who have literally fought for decades for this exact recognition.
Part 7. What remains?
So what remains today? Well, it's a community still living in a state of emergency. To protect children, the government forcibly relocated thousands of them to state-run holding shelters. But Human Rights Watch found that these under-resourced shelters often feel more like punishment, deeply isolating kids from their own families. There's this huge loss of education because families are terrified to let their kids travel to school. And on top of the intense psychosocial trauma and the constant looming threat of sporadic attacks or grave robberies, there's a severe health crisis. Due to poverty and social exclusion, Tanzania has the highest albinism prevalence and skin cancer rates in Africa. Though thankfully programs like the Kili Sun Sunscreen Initiative are stepping up to help. But essentially, this entire community is internally displaced within their own country.
We've tracked the murder, the mystery, and the money throughout this explainer. But it all comes back to that one central provocative question. What happens when a superstition becomes profitable? The answer is absolute tragedy. Tanzania is at a crossroads right now, armed with a 2025 court mandate to finally protect its citizens, but the scars of this trade are going to take generations to heal. Ultimately, the most disturbing part wasn't simply the belief, it was what happened when that belief created a demand, and innocent people became the targets.